From the great halls of their house, there are assembled three who hope to one day be the world's greatest driving heroes. Created from the cosmic legends of the universe comes our team captain, the Vision, Bill Fisher. Their soon-to-be Wonder Woman, Vicki Fisher. Our Captain Marvel and head flight trainee, Jennifer Scripchuk. And our Batman, the master of tools, gadgets, and all things mechanical, our mild-mannered soon-to-be billionaire, Alan Danvers. Their mission, to fight injustice, share what is right and wrong, to get you out of your house and come out racing with them, and serve all mankind. They are the Garage Heroes in Training Team.
Welcome to the Garage Heroes in Training podcast. I'm going to be one of the hosts for this episode, and my name is Bill. Who else is hosting?
I'm Vicki.
And I'm Jen.
That's
Jen's
right.
back. Yay.
I'm back. Yay.
Jen's back. You know, if Jen's coming back, it's got to be something special. Could be like the 300th episode of our podcast.
No way.
It could be.
Wait, 300. Holy cow.
That's
Anyway.
insane.
And anybody who's been paying attention at home knows how we celebrate every 50 episodes. We have our favorite guest who comes on and celebrates with us. We still don't know why, but we're not going to ask him that because he might think about it and say, why do I do this? We have Ross Bentley back. Welcome back, Ross.
Congratulations on 300.
Thank you.
I'm convinced, though, that you guys are counting by fives.
Listen, it's much like our track time. If we count by a different number, perhaps we'll be faster.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
No, that's awesome. That 300 episodes. That's you passed me and you've lapped me.
Well, again, the same joke applies. It's the only time we'll ever pass you, Ross, but we're going to try.
Bill's not a lot to talk about usually.
I do. So since it's 300 episodes and since we have listeners, we thought we would start a little bit of a Q&A with you for some listener submitted questions.
I love Q&A sessions.
Well,
Because that way I don't have to really think.
you just answer.
Yeah.
Allow me to spew the answer on you. Yes, very well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we have a listener. He's a friend of a former guest, actually a brother of a former guest, and his name, we'll call him Mario since, that's his first name. And he said, so we are all getting older, and I wonder how age has crept up on Ross. Is he getting slower with age? How's his speed versus his peak? What's he doing smarter now that results in a better lap time that he wish he'd learned earlier? And are there things he was doing at a younger age that he just can't do as well now?
Right.
Well, thanks for the reminder that we're getting older.
Well,
Because I've completely forgotten that part, so.
The alternative is much worse,
Exactly. Yeah. I tested that once, but I got away with it. So, what's the saying? The older I get, the faster I was, something like that.
Exactly. But we've got records for you, Ross. You can't deny. We could actually go look up yours.
Yeah. It's an interesting question because I actually did a WRL race at Sebring in, when was that? The end of October, 24-hour race. Mm-hmm. And it was actually the longest I'd spent in a race car in many years. Usually when I'd go and do one of these races, I kind of show up, I get 3 laps of practice, I hop in, do a stint, and then that's it. Mm-hmm. Well, this time, because it's a 24-hour race, I got 3 stints and they were longer. And I have to say my stint in the middle of the night, how do I say this? Thought it coming across the wrong way. I went reasonably fast. Let's just put it that way. And it was, so first of all, it was the most inflow in the zone that I had been in years. So even though I'm older, I think it's still possible to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the advantage that I have is every single day of the year, I wake up and I think about and talk about and write about and do something coach driving every single day. So I would say that I'm sure that I'm not as fast as I was before. And the biggest part of that is, I'm going to say 2 things is I just don't have the time, or I don't put in the time to train physically like I used to.
Right.
And there is something about, if the physically sharper you are, the mentally sharper you're going to be, and the better you're going to be as a driver. So for sure, from just a pure physical perspective, I'm not as good as I used to be. And the second part is, there was a point in my life where I had to be fast, because the only way I made a living, the only way I got paid was to be fast. And I think actually, some people say, well, why do some drivers, why do they get slower with age? Is it their reaction time, all this kind of stuff? I think it comes down to more just how much you're willing to sacrifice, how bad do you want it? When your livelihood and your whole career depends on this lap, this corner, you find a way to eke out another tenth or two. And I don't need that anymore as much. I love driving fast as much as I ever had or have ever. But that last little bit that would push me to go, I am going to do this flat. It's like, what's the point? I'm just going to breathe that tiny little bit.
Is it a risk aversion thing, or?
Ultimately, I think it is. I mean, I think it always is. I mean, what's the only thing that stops us from crashing in every single corner is some risk aversion. But it's not I'm worried about getting hurt or crashing this car or anything like that. It's simply, it doesn't matter as much. There was a point in my life where I wanted it so bad that I would do absolutely anything. And now I just at a point where I don't need to want it that bad, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, you can only push the typewriter button so hard writing your book. You don't want to, have to get keyboards every week.
And sprain a finger, like that.
Exactly.
Really, yeah.
It would.
So do you think it's more enjoyable now?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I think in some ways it is. So recently I've spent a little time kind of thinking about this. Part of it is, I mean, there was a point in my racing career where all that mattered was getting to the next level. And I think a lot of pro drivers, you get caught up in that almost too much. And it's just about, I got to get to the next level. I got to get to the next level. I got to get there. And you forget to enjoy, it's the old, not the destination, it's the journey. And I think a lot of drivers get so focused on the destination that they forget about the journey. And I know that sounds all woo woo and everything, but there is something to that. And I have had points in my career where I realized, hey, I need to appreciate what I'm doing. And when I did that, I had more fun. I enjoyed it. And not surprisingly, I drove better at the same time, or when that happened. So I would say that there are times now when I drive when, I enjoy it just as much or maybe more than I did at other times in my career. Now, there was also a point in my career where, when I was instructing and coaching a lot, and there was that fear that this was a risk aversion situation but it wasn't, again, risk of injury or hurting a car. It was risk of my reputation as a coach being hurt. And, if I crashed a car, people go, well, I thought he was supposed to be the expert, and that is a stupid thought to have. And it's a really stupid thought to have while driving on the track, caring about what other people are going to think about you. And that had an effect on the way I drove for a while. And I had to get through that, and also sort of get to that point where, I guess, comfortable with myself enough to go, okay, if I make a mistake, I make a mistake. We're all human. So I would say my enjoyment today when I get in the car is as long as there's no physical discomfort. I have a ruptured disc in my neck, and there are times in a car where that starts to bother me, and that starts to take some of the joy away. But other than that, when I get in a car now, it's all pure fun, and no thoughts of, wow, if I do well here, I might get an opportunity, next race, or wow, if I mess up here, somebody's going to say I'm a bad coach or something. Now I just get in the car and drive. It doesn't matter. So from that perspective, I enjoy it more.
Good.
That's awesome.
The way it should be.
Absolutely. And it's why I tell every driver, have fun, and of course, saying have fun, that's a little bit like telling somebody who's depressed, be happy. Well, but trying to get people to focus on the fun part of it and just the pure joy of driving.
But I think sometimes people forget that, and it's not just with racing, but like whatever interest you have or sport or whatever you have. Sometimes you get so wrapped up in the competitive part of it that you forget that it's actually something you're doing because you enjoy doing it. So
totally agree. And I think we need reminders.
I think that part comes in when people have to hunt for sponsors also. It kind of it adds a back end pressure.
For sure. I mean, and there was too long a period in my racing career when the sponsors meant getting to the next race, and if I didn't have a sponsor, I wouldn't get to the next race. But I'd made a commitment to another sponsor that I would be at that race, so I had to be at that race. So that meant I had to find another sponsor. And by the way, the only way that we could afford to pay the rent and buy groceries was finding a sponsor that we could then take 5% off of that went towards pay to, and there were years where that 5% didn't happen. So for sure that part of it,
it's tough to cut a career out of it. It really is. I have a couple friends who are just trying to figure out a way of doing it. It's hard. It really is. You either got to hustle or you got to contribute somehow,
Absolutely. And I always say that it's the only profession in the world where you try to get paid to do something that somebody else is willing to pay to do.
Right.
If you're a director of marketing for Microsoft, imagine walking in one day into the office and your boss says to you, you're done here because we have somebody over here that's willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to do your job. And they're pretty darn good at it. They're really good at it. And so the life of a race car driver, that's what you compete against. You compete against people who are willing to pay to do your job.
We had a question from Ian, and Ian would like to know a little bit more about your Lotus and why you like it so much.
So I'm reliving my life. So the very first car that I ever owned.
We call that midlife.
Yeah. The very first car that I ever owned in my life was a 1966 Mini Cooper S that I sort of inherited, bought from my older brother. And I fixed it up and I drove it for a year or two or something like that. And then the second car that I bought was a 1969 Lotus Elan Plus 2, because I'd seen photos of them in Road and Track magazine and read about them. And because I guess at one point, my friend's older brother gave me a stack of Road and Track magazines from the mid 60s. I'd read all these stories about Lotus and Formula One and Jimmy Clark, and I don't know why, but it just connected with me. Lotus just connected with me. Like some people, Ferrari connects with them, right? For me, Lotus connected with me. And so the idea of buying a Lotus was just, that was the coolest thing. So I bought a 1969 Lotus Elan Plus 2 and, then went through many other cars through the last bunch of years and many years. And then in 2009, I decided that I needed just a runaround car when I'm home, which is not very often because what I usually drive is whatever Hertz gives me. And so I bought a 2009 Mini Cooper S and thought, I'm starting over again. Well, after 11 years of that, but still a car, it spends more time sitting in my garage than anything else. I decided it was time to get something else and have some fun. And I went, there is nothing that costs less than $75,000 to $100,000 that I really want to have fun with. And I just like, why would I want a $100,000 car that sits in the garage all the time? So I thought, what I really want is an old British sports car. And the funny part of this is, so a friend of mine, Sam Smith, who used to write for Road and Track, now writes for Haggerty, just awesome guy, brilliant guy about cars. I called up Sam and said, Sam, I'm thinking about a Lotus. Talk me off the edge here.
Said no.
15 minutes
Nope.
later, he connected me with the top Lotus experts in the country who are scouring North America to find a Lotus for me.
Oh, that's a true friend.
Yes. And here's the weird thing is they would send me, hey, somebody's got a half restored car in California, or, there's a concours show car in Florida. And I didn't want a show car and I didn't want a project. I wanted something I could drive. And then and I kept, I'd get a few of these and it's like, no, that's not what I want. And I was in no rush. So, but anyway, one day this guy that is a Lotus expert in Colorado sends me an email and says, hey, there's a 69 Lotus Elan for sale. It's on Craigslist and it's in the Seattle area. I'm like, wow. So I give this guy a call. I find out the car is 11 miles from my home. And I go and look at it and I go, that is exactly what I want. It's red. It's got less than 1,000 miles on it since it was restored.
Red.
It's
You're asking for trouble.
Yes. So within a day, it was in my garage. And driving a Lotus Elan, I mean, the cars they're 1,500 pounds. The funny thing is that I parked it in my driveway next to my Mini, took a photo of it, and the Mini looks like an SUV in comparison. Like it's a small little car, the top has been up on it once, but I just take it out on nice days. And the Lotus is just, the handling on it is, it's sort of been the model of, that's how you make a good handling car. When Gordon Murray designed the very first McLaren road car called the F1, at the end of when the car was built, he said, my only regret is I could never make the steering as good as my Lotus Elan. And that's you drive it and you're absolutely connected to it in the road. Can't help but drive it with a massive.
What year is it?
It's a 69. So it's
adorable.
It's 53 years old and it has 53,000 miles on it. So it's at 1,000 miles every year, I guess.
That's awesome.
It's
And
adorable.
I think I may have put more than 1,000 miles on it in the past 5 months. So
True.
That's the way it should be.
Absolutely.
Well, we have another question. This question
Yes.
is from Chris. What are the few of the biggest changes that you have had since writing your first Speed Secrets? And was anything wrong?
Thanks a lot, Chris. So the good thing is that I'm pretty sure I can say there's nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of things that needed clarification. One of the things that I'm pretty sure that I actually put in words in that very first book is these speed secrets are not the law. They're not rules. There are exceptions to everything. But I guess, one of the things that I've learned one of the things I've learned is that if something's in print, some people take it as gospel. They take it as like, that is it. And, I think in there, I'd read one of the things that comes up often is, I'd said, you should either be on the gas pedal or on the brake pedal. And there are exceptions to that. There are times when you need to let the car, as you come off the brakes, let the car finish rotating, turning into the corner before you go back to power. Not always, but sometimes. And so there were things like that became, I'm going to say, I learned to try to preface everything I say by, hey, there are exceptions to what I'm saying. Even what I'm saying here today, there are exceptions to everything I say. So that, and the other big thing I think is just, well, no, two other things. One is just the whole thing that I touched on in the very first book around braking. I've expanded that. I've just learned so much more about that and about vision. So two big areas that have, I guess I've just gone a whole lot deeper with and I have a deeper understanding of.
Okay. So we have a shy adult road racer to be, and they were asking, what order is the best order to read your books? Should they read them as you release them or something else? I'm
trying to think of a shy adult.
Well, they didn't tell us what the name is, so we're
Oh, okay. So, read Ultimate Speed Secrets. That's it.
Okay.
Because it has most of every other book, and at least, and it was a place where I was able to go back and clarify and add more to what I originally had written. So I would say that unless you want, well, I should say, so if it's all about driving and racing, read Ultimate Speed Secrets. If you want just a little bit more depth on the mental game, you could get Inner Speed Secrets.
Okay.
Secret 3. If you want to know more about if you're trying to make a career in racing, then I don't even remember which one it is. Is it? I think it's 5, Speed Secrets 5. I think it is. That's more around has more around the business and the career and sponsorship and marketing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But Ross, I noticed that Speed Secret 6 was written like a autobiography, at least from the cover. I think Speed Secret 6, The Perfect Driver. I think you wrote my autobiography. Is that what you did for us? It's
no, that was
right
don't remember I was interviewing you and That's All About You.
Oh, okay. Very well.
Bill, The Perfect Driver. Yeah.
Sitting right next to my bed. This was next on the list. So we'll do that.
So that was I'll say that was one of the most fun books I wrote. And because what I tried to do was write that in a way, and it is, Ultimate Speed Secrets does not have much or anything from Speed Secret 6. So it's a different way of presenting information, because the idea was to help you get a mental model of what the perfect driver is and does. So it's different.
The unattainable goal that we all strive for. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Miss Jen.
So we have a question from Adam, and he's interested in drills to help break a plateau. So it seems that no matter what he does or what he tries, he gets the same lap time. So he wants to know, he said, what should I do to get my times lower?
Do better.
Cheat. Because you can't beat cheating. Boy, there you go.
If you start the lap times later.
All right, well, that's the podcast.
Yeah, there we go. Mic drop. Boom. Yeah. We always joke that if you're using a stopwatch, the fastest lap times are always taken by the father of the driver.
Yeah.
Second fastest lap times are taken by the coach of the driver. And then there's the real lap times. Mm-hmm. Anyways, seriously, to the whole plateau thing is the challenge with that question is I don't know enough to be able to really answer it, because what's the reason for the plateau?
Right.
And, if we were sitting here right now talking to Adam, I'd be, okay, let's talk about this plateau. And, I had a similar kind of a question just recently around a driver saying they always qualify like 5th, 6th, something like that. They go out in qualifying and they're the fastest, and in the last few laps, other drivers go faster and he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I just seem like there's a plateau. So one of the questions I asked that driver was, okay, close your eyes and imagine yourself on the grid, on the pace lap, coming towards the green flag. What position are you in? And many drivers, not all, but many drivers will go, oh, I'm in 4th place, or I'm in 12th place. I go, okay, then the plateau is probably caused more by your belief system, the mental game around what you believe where you're supposed to be. So understanding what causes the plateau is the first thing. So if Adam was asking me, how do I break through this plateau? The first thing I'd say is dig deep and find out what's stopping it. What's causing that plateau? And is it a technique thing? Is it a fear-based thing? I mean, and again, fear is not necessarily, oh, I'm scared of getting hurt, but it might be, I'm afraid that if I crash the car, then I can't afford to crash the car.
Right.
Or it could be, like I said earlier, the fear of what's somebody going to think if I crash a car. So it's trying to dig down and find out what is the cause of that plateau. So I think Adam asked something about, are there drills or whatever? The main drill is ask yourself question after question after question until you start to kind of dig down and find some potential reason for that plateau, and then start to dig away at that.
I think the one thing we've noticed is it makes sense when you say it, but most people don't think about it. If you just keep doing the same thing, it's not going to change. So you have to try something different to break a plateau. So,
and Bill, that's an awesome point, in that a lot of drivers, I mean, they try the same thing but with more effort.
Yep.
And that doesn't help. And sometimes I think a lot of drivers are afraid to experiment too much. And sometimes rightly so, there's some concern that, well, if I try that, I may spin off the track and crash the car and all that, right? And yet sometimes you just got to go out there and it's like, I'm going to brake earlier and I'm going to brake a lot lighter and see what happens. I'm going to turn in earlier. Everybody says you should never turn in early. Find out, try it, see what happens. And so I think sometimes you just have to go and experiment with things, and not like, okay, I'm going to turn in 3 inches earlier, turn in 3 feet earlier, turn in a car's length earlier, brake half the brake pressure, and just find out what happens when you enter the corner 5 miles an hour too fast. And yeah, I know some people are going, yeah, well, you crash. Nah, I mean, obviously some of this is dependent on where you are with your abilities, but most drivers, if they enter the corner 5 miles an hour too fast, they would not crash. They may slide wide, they may spin, they may even drop wheels at part of the track, but they're not going to crash and hit the wall unless they just panic and do the wrong things. So yeah, experiment is one thing. I would say another thing that stops people sometimes, that causes a plateau, is a comfort level thing, where their comfort level is here, and going beyond that comfort level, well, it's just uncomfortable. and we get comfortable being comfortable, but you have to get, like I always use the example of extreme athletes. Travis Pastrana comes to mind all the time.
Yeah.
Like, there's a guy who, he is uncomfortable unless he's jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, or leaping a car 800 feet in the air, or, you know, doing a triple backflip on a motorcycle. Like, he's not comfortable doing what most of us do. Now, I'm not saying you have to go to that extreme,
Yeah.
but getting to the point where you like the feeling of, oh, the rear snapped out here. I love that feeling. That is so cool. Rather than the, whoa, that kind of caught me off guard. And, you know, obviously if you spend time on a skid pad, that helps. But sometimes you just have to play more, I think, too.
Sure. You can get really good at doing the same thing over and over, and there's your plateau.
Yeah. Yep. So can I just jump? So I got my Lotus back in September. I've had it out a number of days, just going for drives and stuff like that. When was that? Just after Christmas, just after New Year's. Nice sunny day, but the roads were sort of dry and wet. And I go and find my favorite twisty road, and I come down into this one corner, and I look
The roads
ahead.
were dry and wet, Ross?
Dry and wet. So there's
Okay.
dry patches and wet patches.
I was like,
So
cold
I
and
look up
wet.
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. I look up ahead and I see a corner and it's wet, and I'm like, oh boy, finally. And I just come into it and like squirt my foot into the throttle, kick the rear end out, get into this nice big oversteer slides to the corner. And yes, I'd looked around and made sure that was all a good place to do it and everything, but because I'm not recommending that people go in hoonigans on the street, but that was up until then, it was almost like I was not afraid. I was uncomfortable getting the car to slide around.
Mm-hmm.
And I just needed to go and do that. And it was like, oh, now I'm looking for every road and every possibility I can to kick the rear end out of this thing and have a little fun with it. So I think maybe that's it, is just part of the part of the plateau thing is not playing enough. There's some thoughts on.
That's true.
So we have another question from Elon, in quotes.
No idea who it is.
All right.
We're going with Elon.
Yeah. Have you or your drivers driven an EV race car? And what are your thoughts on them? I don't even know what an EV is. Tell me what an EV is.
Electric vehicle?
Okay.
That's why it's Elon. Get it? Elon.
There you go.
Yeah. So yes and yes. Trying to think. So I know drivers who have had, electric cars at the track. Anything from a Tesla to some other, I can't even remember what they were, but so I know people who have done that, track days in Teslas and stuff like that, and wow, are they fast until they run out of battery.
I hear they're getting better.
Yeah. And a good friend of mine, Johannes von Overbeck, Johannes, I think, has some kind of record at Laguna Seca in a Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
He's done some testing for Tesla at Laguna and has some incredible lap time around there. And, the interesting thing about like a Tesla and EV and stuff like that, I think is it's actually not the battery dying, it's the heat.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand enough about it, but it's if they can keep the batteries and everything cool enough, it will go longer. But if you use up every last thing they've got, you might only get 2 or 3 laps out of them. But the cool thing is we're seeing more and more racetracks with charging stations at them, so that's great. Now, the other side of that is I know drivers, and I actually know a lot of engineers that work in Formula E. And I guess I have very mixed feelings based on what I've been told by them. And I've had a driver who will remain unnamed, who is paid a lot of money to drive in Formula E, who has said, I hate it because the engineers basically tell me what I need to do. I need to come to a corner and I need to coast to regenerate power back to the battery. And it's like, I don't brake where I want to brake. I brake, they basically say brake, 1.4 seconds before this marker. And all that's been figured out on a simulation program beforehand. And the drivers, it comes down to which driver can most closely match the simulation that the engineers have told them to follow. And
so fun.
Like and even this driver says, there's a side of it that is fun because it's a challenge. But just the idea that I want to just go and drive the car for what it's got, I can't do that. And I believe that Formula E cars have gotten, they've gotten a lot better in terms of what they're capable of and how long they can go on a charge and all that kind of stuff. But it's gotten less of that from a pure, we need to do this to make the cars last long enough to make a proper show, to now it's just performance things. And I worked with a race engineer in one series who he was in the series that I was involved in. And then on other weekends, he was an engineer for a Formula E team. And he says it's the most fascinating, fun thing that he's ever done in his life from a engineering perspective.
Right.
So I guess I have mixed feelings. My plan was to attend my first Formula E race this year because there's a Formula E race in Vancouver, my hometown, this year. But now it looks like I might be in Europe that weekend, so I may not be able to go there. So I don't know. We'll see. I do want to attend one before I say exactly what I think. I want to see one in person. What I've seen on TV hasn't thrilled me.
You know what they need to do? They need to put the baseball cards in the spokes of the wheels to get the noise, because that worked on my bike when I was 8.
Or get the drivers just to do that sound.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be good. That would be good.
Although I find that when I do that, it kind of fogs up my visor.
Yeah, it does. It does for sure. One more listener question before we go to phase 2 of episode 300. Ben was supposed to ask, but he is apparently tied up with his daddy duties with the little ones. But this comes from a listener called Reed. And he was wondering for some tips to breaking the mental barriers to carrying more speed through a turn.
So somebody named Reed.
Yep.
So often what happens, we all know that the faster we go, because we're human, our instinct is our eyes kind of drop, and it's that fear thing that comes in that if we enter a corner faster than we think we should, our eyes tend to drop and we start looking for, where am I going to crash? So the very first tip is, something so basic, and yet it's practice looking farther ahead. That would be the very first thing. So spend some time coming into the corners and deliberately look even further ahead, and also do mental imagery visualization of doing that as well. So you're building the programming to look farther ahead so that when you come to a fast corner, you do that. The second part of that is, what also is instinct at that point in time is hold your breath. Mm-hmm. And most drivers will do that in fast corners. So again, building the programming or the habits of when you come to that fast corner, you exhale. And you exhale, you relax. It forces your body to relax. When you hold your breath, your brain says, there's something wrong. When we are breathing, our brain says, we're in good shape here. Also, when we hold our breath, we tend to tense up our hands, our arms, our body, and then we're not as sensitive to what the car is telling us. And so then the second part, so when we exhale, when we just start breathing, we relax our body and we become more sensitive to that. Mm-hmm. So those are the two sort of big, I'm going to say, mental barriers that cause physical reactions, that if you practice the right reactions, then it becomes a little easier. You just tend to stay more relaxed. The other thing that helps with fast corners is it depends a little bit on the corner and the car and all that kind of stuff. But no matter what car you're driving, the better balanced the car is, the more overall grip it's got. So if you're hard on the brakes and you got the car staying on its nose, you actually have less overall grip. Yes, you put more grip on the front tires, but you've lost grip on the rear tires, and you lose more than you gain. So you lose more from the rear than you gain. So overall, you have less grip. And I know that, it's like, what? Yeah, well, that's just the way physics work, and tires and cars, all that kind of stuff. So the better balanced you can keep a car in that fast corner, the more grip you're going to have. And again, what is sort of a natural tendency in fast corners is to tense up and quickly release the gas pedal, or hang on the brakes a little bit too long, put more weight in the front. So we actually have less grip. So the sooner you can kind of get it embedded in your mind that the less I do to the car, the more balanced the car is, the flatter the platform is, the more overall grip I'm going to have. And therefore it's going to get easier. And I think practically every driver has had a moment like that where, wow, I went faster and it was actually better.
Mm-hmm.
It may have felt a little uncomfortable at first, but then it felt better. And then it kind of goes back to what we were talking earlier about getting comfortable with being a little uncomfortable at first, and then to the point where this is my new normal. And that's when the magic happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're fast.
I think the one of your podcasts, you had a discussion, and you started talking about sometimes it's easier to, when you're creeping up and trying to carry more speed, it's easier to come in with a shallower brake angle or brake pressure, because you have basically you have more time to get off the brake without overslowing.
Yes, and that leads to sort of two technique things to help you with fast corners. If it's a corner that you have to do some braking in, first of all, do it earlier.
Yep.
Because the natural tendency is, I want to go faster. So we tend to think that we're not even really thinking, but what we tend to do then is actually compress the brake zone, move the brakes in, and now we're entering this fast corner with the car kind of up on its nose, and we don't want it loaded on its nose. We want it balanced again. So that's the first thing is, if you're going to make a speed adjustment, do it early and get to the point where you're off the brakes almost as you turn in, and then you're just feeding in the throttle all the way through it. Again, keeps the car better balanced. And the second thing, to your real point there, Bill, is as a approach to, I want to take this corner, I want to carry more speed through this corner. Brake in the exact same place you always brake before, just brake lighter, and ask yourself, okay, well, how hard am I braking? Okay, I'm using a 5 pedal, a 5 pressure out of 10 being threshold braking or into the ABS. So I'm only braking at a 5. Okay, now this time I'm going to brake at a 4. Now I'm going to brake at a 3.5. Now I'm going to brake at a 3. And you just kind of gradually keep braking lighter and lighter. The car is better balanced, and it sticks, and it just gives you tons of confidence.
You know what worked really well for me the one time when I learned this, and kind of like one big gulp. I was going into turn 1 at pit race, and I pushed the brakes, and they were on fire. And I went around the turn much faster speed. And my biggest concern was not that, oh, I have no brakes and my brakes are on fire, was, wow, I could have been going through this turn a whole lot faster, because that wasn't so bad at all. So if you don't have brakes, it's wonders for how fast you can go through a turn.
Yeah, if you can just take the brake pads out of the calipers and turn them around backwards.
Yep.
That'll make you faster. But actually, to your point, Bill, is how many times have we learned by a mistake?
Oh yeah.
Or a mistake by the car, and all of a sudden we find ourselves barreling through this corner and going, oh, well, that worked. Maybe it wasn't pretty, a little messy. You went through there, but you carried all that speed and was like, wow, I can do this.
Yeah.
And so don't be afraid to make some mistakes.
Well, that's like the cardinal rule of our team. So All right, Mr. Bentley, we thought it was only appropriate that since you were kind enough on our last celebratory episode to give us some coaching, we were going to give you some feedback on how the coaching went. I don't know that the ladies know they're going to be doing this, and I hope they're both off of mute when we finally get to the point. But for those playing the home game, Jennifer on the last podcast listed her strengths as none. Then she was quickly overruled and told that her strengths that I know for sure were slow corners and the track line. And her weaknesses were that she surrenders to everybody in traffic. Fast corners, not her friend. Straightaways, she would not stay on full throttle and had a lot of coasting. And her biggest breakthrough of the year was comfort driving on track. So, given those as inputs, your prescription, Dr. Bentley, was that she should practice fast feet on the street when moving from the throttle to the brake, concentrate on 3% more wide open throttle on the next time we went to the track, and try and sneak in some quick squirts of full throttle, even when it seemed like it wasn't going to be useful, and try driving the track in one gear higher than normal. How'd we do, John? Is that what we did?
That's what we did.
And
Don't tell me that you crashed on the street.
No, I didn't.
Oh, good. Oh.
But she was wide open throttle when she hit that wall.
No, it wasn't a wall. I'm like, no, I did try everything, and I did feel like it helped, and I did see some improvement. So, I mean, Bill could probably tell you more about my improvement because you know why? Bill has statistics.
I have data.
Always. He's got data.
Well, before we get to the statistics, what felt better and what didn't feel better, and so what worked a little bit or at all? What worked?
I think just paying attention, definitely on the road, like, because I kind of always was very diligent about driving on the road, but I never used actually driving to work as much, I guess, as practice. And not that, like in an unsafe way or a way that would set me out as somebody that would be pulled over by the police, but but just being conscious of the way I was driving, I think helped. Like that suggestion was good, like, because now even when I get in the car, like I think about that stuff, and you're braking later, and I just things that people typically wouldn't do on the road, but I'm just doing on the way to work. So and I think that helped me on the track. So I am still a little nervous around other cars, and I do still let people pass me, but I'm getting better with that. So, I see a bit of improvement, but still have a lot to go as far as that goes. But yeah.
You mean it didn't just go snap? There it is. It's all everything's perfect.
No, not at all.
Okay. Well, I suck as a coach then. So
no,
go poof.
We'll keep you, Ross.
We'll see. It takes time. Like you have to take all of that, and it has to marinate, and then you have to practice, and then then you have to practice some more. And
oh, really? Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll show you, Ross.
Yeah. What didn't work as well as you'd hoped for?
I don't know if something didn't work. It's just, the amount of track time I had from, us talking and, me actually doing that, I don't think was a whole lot. So like, I just really haven't had the time to practice on the track, like, to work on some of the stuff. But yeah, like, I mean, it's when I'm out there, it's better, I'm using it.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, for sure, it takes time, and it's reprogramming, right? It's doing a little reprogramming.
Yeah, exactly.
If you at least start to be aware of it when you're driving on the street, you're going to start to build a little bit of change that programming a little bit. And then if on the track, you can start spending a little bit more time at full throttle.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I'm sure that if you spend more time at full throttle, you will then be faster. And the speed difference between you and somebody else passing you is not going to be as great. So you're not going to be quite so, oh, I got to let them get by me. You're just going to be like, you can't keep up with me. I'll worry about you later. So,
but I did improve quite a bit on not lifting.
Okay.
Yeah. Bill, did you want to say something?
3 seconds.
3 seconds.
3 seconds.
Yeah. So
Wow.
that was a huge improvement.
Okay.
Yeah.
3 seconds. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
How much more do you want? How much more do you think is there?
Want it all, Ross.
Right?
You want to be able to do a lap in -3 seconds.
But it's funny though, because I don't really pay attention too much to time. It's especially when I'm in the car. So, which is a good thing right now. I just get everything when I get out. So, but for me, that works. Like, I just get in there and, do what I feel is right. And then see, if it worked when I got out, if it made my time faster. So, I know Vicki had mentioned before, we were talking on another podcast, like she became very dependent on looking at the time. And, I'm not even there yet as far as like being worried about that. So, it's interesting,
So how does it feel to know that you've gone 3 seconds faster?
It didn't feel different to me, really. It just, it not feel like I went faster. It felt like a smoother lap. Do you know what I mean? Like it felt more at ease.
More together.
You know what I mean? Like it just went smoother. Yeah. But, like I said, I'm not obsessed with like the time or I'm looking at a time or anything. So, but it's just like entering a corner. Like, you either have it or you don't. Like it's either a good corner or like, you're just way off and it's just going to be bad. So, and you try to save it. So it just kind of felt that, felt right. So, yeah.
And how did it feel from a satisfaction or accomplishment perspective? Like,
it felt wonderful. Once I got out and Bill's like, that was 3 seconds. I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. I was very happy, like very happy. Yeah.
So don't lose sight of that. Like, I think a lot of us kind of go, oh yeah, okay, did that. Like it's good to get a little reward because it actually helps your programming.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're going to take her to Dairy Queen next time.
If you keep knocking off chunks of time like that, though, you won't have to worry about that other problem of cars sneaking up and trying to always pass you. That'll be something did you want to worry about as much. And I, at least speaking for myself, I think I got more comfortable in traffic as passing people than I was like being passed. So the more people you get to faster and start passing more people, you'll become more comfortable in traffic, kind of going the other way through traffic. It's my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just need to get to the point where, I'm just faster than other people. I have to worry about it.
Yep. It's pretty nice.
Not that far, Jen. I can see it from here.
Yep.
Doing great. All right. My beautiful bride, Miss Vicki, listed her strengths as getting through traffic and her ability to use it to her benefit. She also is a avid truck hunter. She likes racing other pickup trucks. Hopefully she will continue to do that now that she's in a Honda. Weaknesses were overslowing and brake pressure options, meaning she wasn't sure what pressure, when, and where to apply it. She needs to stop lifting on straights and not staying on full throttle until the beginning of her braking. And she has a habit of safety braking or pre-tapping, just even if she doesn't need to touch the brakes going into a turn. And she listed her biggest breakthrough was slipping and sliding the rear end, especially after going to the skid pad, I think her favorite place to be. And the drills that you prescribed, Dr. Ross, was do more of what you're good at, so you have less time to do what you're not good at. Spend 3% more time at wide open throttle. The quick squirts again. And then you asked her to start thinking of her brake pressure on a 1 to 10 scale and think about the options that she has, and try driving the track in one higher gear than her normal.
Obviously some overlap in my
well, they are
prescription.
sisters. They are sisters. So, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Miss Vicki.
So, yeah, I have been working on it. Going through the track one gear higher was exhilarating. I do have to say, but I did well.
Okay.
It was definitely something that I could continue to do.
Yep.
The overslowing on the brake pressure and the options is still an issue, because trying to get my footwork done in the proper amount of time without coasting. Does that make sense? I'm getting tied up there.
Do you mean on the approach to braking, like you're on the throttle and by the time you come off the throttle and go to the brake, is that where you're...
Because trying to get my proper footwork done in time before I actually have to lift the clutch. I'm having a confusion issue because I feel like I'm rushing it at the end versus setting, because sometimes I feel like, what's that, Bill?
So we have a question that's going to help you. And I think we got into a discussion during our Dominated with Dawson segments on proper shifting, downshifting procedure going into a turn, especially with a high threshold braking type turn. And I know Vicki, it seems through the discussions, she doesn't let me in a car with her, but through the discussions, I don't know that she knows 100% conviction what the proper procedure should be. Like, do I have to get all my braking and then my downshifting in before turn in, or is it okay to go after turn in? Because she was firmly in the HPD 1, thou shalt brake in a straight line, release brake, and then turn in. And she's trying to figure out, I think, still in her mind exactly what she should be doing. At least that's what I think.
I know what I should do, and that's have an instructor in the car with me next time. To actually,
and what would the instructor help you with?
You know what? It's a confusion in the area that I'm having of transitioning into a turn without popping the clutch. And sometimes I kind of ride a little bit of the gears and it kind of, I guess, I don't know the proper terminology of it, as like maybe trail braking through. Is that right? Or
sure,
riding? Well, riding the brake, and sometimes the clutch are kind of doing like not the clutch, but the gas and brake at the same time going through. I just feel like I am rushing it at the very end to get my proper everything segmented and my proper gear in place and the braking and everything without popping the clutch and spinning out. Because does that make sense? It feels like I'm rushing it at the end, and if I wait too long, then I'm coasting. Or if not wait too long, but if I'm either coasting or I risk popping the clutch sometimes.
So first of all, there's no substitute for practicing the whole procedure of braking and downshifting and getting that to the point where it's just like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And you've got it. And it sounds to me like, and I haven't seen, but I'm just, the way you're describing it sounds like you haven't quite got it to the point where it's just boom, 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 it happens. and you don't really have to think about it. Right now, you're having to think braking, downshift,
and it's when I have to think about it is when I'm starting to mess up.
Yes. So you have to get it. You have to do enough repetition of this to the point where you no longer think about that. It just happens. So that's one thing that sort of comes to mind. The other thing is a lot of times many drivers don't brake enough in the beginning of the brake zone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this whole thing of, well, you got to squeeze the brakes on. Get on the brakes harder. I like to think about it as get 2/3 of your braking done in the first third of the brake zone. So let's say your brake zone is, it's 300 feet, from the 300 marker to the turn-in point, it's 300 feet long.
Right.
Get on the brakes hard at the 300, brake, get most of the stuff done in the first, from the 300 to the 150 board.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the 50 board, at that point, all you're doing at that point is you're starting to think about, how am I going to come off the brakes to carry the right speed into the corner? You've got your braking, you got the bulk of your braking, you've got your downshifting done, you got all that done and out of the way. And now you can focus on corner entry speed.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds to me like sometimes you're coming into the corner and you're still, excuse the language here, fumbling for the right gear. And should I, am I just letting the clutch out and all that kind of stuff? So the sooner you can get to the point where that has become such a habit that it just boom, 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 it happens. And then you're focused more on the corner rather than the braking and downshifting part.
Okay.
Now, easy to say, right? Just practice it more.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm,
just do better.
Just do better.
And by the way, be happy.
I am happy. It's just, the shorter I'm getting that, it's like sometimes I would get my all my work done and then kind of not pound the brakes. So now I'm shortening that distance, and it's a little terrifying, but in that quick segment now, like I said before, now that I have to think about it, now it's just like, it's like now the segments aren't lining up, but before everything was,
you had more time.
It's weird. Yeah, it's weird. So,
well, what you may end up finding is that you start to make your braking and downshifting so efficient that you get on the brakes at the 300, and by the time you get to the 50 marker, you're like,
I still got time.
I have so much time. I have to accelerate to get to the corner.
Yeah.
And great, because then you can start to shift in and go, okay, now I'm going to start my brake zone at the 250, and you shift everything in, and then you may find that, I can even shift it into the 200 point. And now you instead of that whole braking downshifting thing taking 350 feet, you're now doing it all in 250 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's going to take some practice. And do you drive a manual shift on the street?
That's where I was going.
I'm going to have to now. I'm going to have to pull one out.
So there's almost no better way to practice this, is just that every single time you come to a traffic light, every single time you come to a corner, you brake, downshift, go through the gears. And it's kind of cumbersome and all that kind of stuff, but eventually it just happens and you no longer think about it. And it will definitely help that.
Mm-hmm.
Only you had a Miata you could drive.
Yeah, it might be time to bring them. Miata has no heat. Not really. It doesn't really have heat, but when it gets warmer, definitely.
We have a Honda Fit.
Oh, you have a Honda Fit.
You too could have a Honda Fit. Like everything that's mine isn't yours already. But anyway.
So but I thoroughly enjoyed the driving one gear higher.
Well, why did that make you feel so exhilarated?
Because I could do it.
Her times were faster.
Right, because I could do it. And I don't know why I wasn't doing it before, so that was a big breakthrough for me, I'd have to say.
And it probably just made the whole corner entry, braking, downshifting thing a lot less to do.
Yeah. It's still, I still have to do that straightaway thing. And that's just that's just something I really have to like work through, I think. But
just stay in on the throttle and rate the very break
Yeah.
point and that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I went out to my last HPDE and I got leveled up into HPDE 3. And granted, the place that we were at, it wasn't, to me, it didn't feel legit. But although I was working with a lot of faster cars and I felt quite intimidated going out there with the faster car, a little bit, but they kept asking everybody, okay, so, obviously straightaways and then segments on where they want everybody to, how does it go?
You're allowed to point by and pass on certain segments.
Point
of
by
the
and
passing zones.
Right, passing zones. That's right. And then, but they were still omitting the corners. And then they would keep coming in and they would open more of the track up to us and all this stuff up. And I just, I was like the new guy in there. And I was working on, they were asking questions of, does this feel okay to you? And does this feel okay to you guys? They were asking me, does this feel okay to you? I'm like, I said, I'm not intimidated by any of this. I'm working on my own stuff. So I got my own things I'm trying to tackle here. So if you guys are holding this back from me, I say open the whole thing up. He goes, oh, no, we can't do that. And I'm like, well, because
you're a racer there. You shouldn't be intimidated by any of those guys.
No.
You just have a race car driver. I'm just here to work on all of it.
Right. And it was refreshing not having everybody yell at me about point buys because that really wasn't a discussion. I was just like, open the whole thing up. I'm okay. Oh, no, we can't do that. I'm like, well, if you're holding everything back because of whatever, I says, I'm good, but my mistake there was I need to get an instructor in the car. And I don't mean to disparage my husband, but I might have you in there, but
you need to be a passenger too.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like you're ready for a ride with somebody who can't take it all the way down to where they should really do late braking and see how this stuff works. I've definitely benefited in my own track and racing career from getting to ride with some really great drivers, and I've learned stuff from riding with students. I mean, I always learn something when I get in the car with somebody. But yeah, I think you're ready to watch somebody do it real time next to, because I know you don't watch videos.
Yeah,
so you go sit with somebody in the car.
I wouldn't say it's plateaued. I would say that it's something that I can't get through, and I need to have another level of like next level. Help me get through this. Show me that it can. What I need to do, and so
well, I think,
and probably just for the confidence part of it too. So
if you had the right instructor in the car with you,
yeah,
and you said to the instructor, I want you to encourage me to stay at full throttle down the straightaways. And that, if I was riding with you, I'd be like, stay on the throttle, on the throttle, on the throttle, on the throttle, stay on the throttle until I say brake. So on the throttle, on the throttle, on the throttle, on the throttle, go, 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 brake now.
Okay.
And if you have an instructor doing that, I mean, and you do that for a bunch of laps, all of a sudden you go, oh, this is easy.
Yeah.
How many times did I say the word flat to you, Jen?
Bill, that's exactly what Bill does. Just what you did. What you did.
Good.
Yep.
I've been instructed by a good instructor, shall we say.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's where I'm at with everything.
Okay. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So they did their work for us, and I think they still got a little bit to do. But I definitely did, looking at the data and driving with Jen, because Vicki won't let me drive with her. It showed. I mean, it was a big jump.
There was improvement.
Great improvement.
Well, if you ever get to the point where there is nothing else to learn, let me know.
There's always something. There's always in training. Always in training.
I'm dying to meet somebody that's got to the end. It's like that. I can't remember who was it, Xfinity or Comcast. One of those internet providers had an ad on TV a while ago. There was a guy sitting at the keyboard typing away, going, and you hear this ping, and he sits back and goes, and on the screen it says, "You have reached the end of the internet." That's
right. I saw that one. I know what you're talking about.
and it's like that's an awesome ad, but it's the same kind of thing with driving. If you ever get to the point where it goes bing, you've you've done it. You've got to the end of driving. You've learned everything. That'd be cool. No, it wouldn't.
All right. Well, Ross, you only taught two of us, so we can't go through Ben and I. You know, I mean, there's nothing else that we need to work on. But we do have some technical questions that we have a segment on our podcast called Dominating with Dawson that we try and address either listener questions or our questions or just questions about driving in general in a kind of a Q&A thing. I don't know where we came up with this. It's, you know, it's totally new. Nobody's ever done this before.
Never.
But occasionally we come to a question where we don't all agree or we don't quite understand it, or Bill can't even figure out how to ask the question, so nobody knows how to answer it because I know what I want to say, but I did. So we thought we'd subject you to the same level of question and answer and see if you can help us digest some of these topics that we're just not fully fluent enough in to explain it to somebody. Kind of like that
difficult.
intro.
These sound difficult.
No, they're not difficult. It's just,
Okay.
I don't know how to do it. But anyway.
Okay. The answer
Anybody?
is 42.
42? All right. Very
42.
well. 42. 42 sounds like it. Anybody have one they want to pick, or should I go first?
You go.
All right. Very well. All right. So one of our favorite podcasts, which you were a guest on, I believe, the Track Walking podcast. They had Paul Gerard on, and they were talking about the friction circle and how you as a driver can influence the size of the friction circle and actually make this friction circle larger. And I tried to explain this in a way that made any sense whatsoever. There's just as you driver can induce the friction circle to be artificially smaller. And I failed miserably. So I was hoping that you could bail me out, Ross. How can the driver affect the functional size of the friction circle?
Well, the simple answer to that, I think, goes back to what I was saying earlier on. If when we brake, we put more load on those front tires, they gain grip. The rear tires become unloaded and they lose grip. Well, they lose more than the fronts gain. So overall, the car has less grip. Same thing when you go around a corner. When you go around a right-hand corner, the car leans to the outside. You're putting more load on the left side tires. They gain grip. The inside tires lose grip because they're becoming unloaded. And again, it has to do with the way you put more load on a tire. It gains grip, but it's not a linear relationship, meaning that you keep putting more load on, more load on, more load on. The traction doesn't increase at the same rate. It actually increases less the more load you put on it. So the bottom line of that is the more balanced you keep a car, the more overall grip it has. So if you come up to a corner and you really quickly turn the steering wheel really quickly, you know it's going to cause a lot of weight transfer, a lot of load transfer. It's going to put a lot of load on those outside tires, take a lot of load off the inside tires, and therefore the car is going to have less grip than if you come up to that same corner and you're a little more progressive with the steering and you're a little smoother with the steering. The car is still going to have some load transfer, but not as much. And therefore the car is going to have more grip. So one way to increase the size of the friction circle is to drive smoother, because the smoother you drive, the better balance the car is and the more grip it's going to have, and therefore that circle gets bigger. There's a limit to it though. I mean, one way to be really, really, really smooth is to turn the steering wheel into a corner like this. And obviously this is a podcast, so you can't see me, but I'm moving my hands extremely slow. At this point, you'd be off the edge of the track. You have to do some things quickly, but if you can do them quickly at the same time, unloading, unbalancing the car as much as possible, you've increased the size of the friction circle.
So I guess we're balancing smooth and getting the car to a neutral point as best we can without overly going slow.
Right. And we're balancing, again, we could be one way to be really, really smooth is to drive around track at 1 mile an hour.
Mhm.
That's not the point. We got to go fast and be smooth, or flip that around the other way. We got to be smooth and fast. So it's the best drivers find a better balance between those two. And just because you're quick with the controls doesn't necessarily mean that you're unsmooth, but it's more likely that you're going to be unsmooth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's finding the right balance of that. And by the way, there are corners where you sacrifice a little bit of that overall grip to get the car to change direction. If it's a really tight corner, I would rather just get the car to change direction quickly and then be able to get on the gas again to get out of there, than to be so smooth that I have more grip. So again, some corners, faster corners, you compromise the how quickly you change direction to gain more overall grip. In slower, tighter corners, you tend to compromise the grip. You sacrifice a little grip to get the car to change direction. And again, I mean, put Lewis Hamilton in your car or Max Verstappen in your car, and they are going to keep the car better balanced. I shouldn't say that. Everybody listening to this podcast is going to be just as good as Lewis and Max, but let's assume you're not quite there yet.
That's for episode 350.
Exactly, 350. Okay, so the reason they're so fast is they can get the car to change direction and keep the car balanced better than most other drivers. I mean, what's the difference between Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas this past few years? I would say on average, Hamilton balances the car better than Bottas does. And so that's what we're trying to do. So how do you increase the size of the friction circle? Keep the car better balanced, because then the car is going to have more overall grip.
Use it.
And if you kept the car better balanced, you have more overall grip. That means the theoretical size of the circle, the friction circle, which is never really a circle, but it actually gets bigger. That's the ability the car has. Are you using it is the question.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You have to use it. I mean, if it's got extra, if you don't use it doesn't matter. The one thing that was interesting in the discussion was Paul Gerard had said he had only seen very few drivers that he would consider fast that were really smooth, and one of them that he labeled was Jackie Stewart.
Yeah, and this is we tend to think of smooth as being this like a chauffeur around the track. Well, again, you can be that smooth, but you're going to be slow.
Right.
Again, it's a trade-off. And yet I think, you watch Formula One drivers, and in a way they don't look smooth because the cars are so violent and they change direction so quickly and all that. But the subtle differences is I'm going to, and I have no way of proving this, but I believe that Lewis Hamilton is a tiny bit smoother than Bottas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he's able to keep the car on that knife edge more often than Bottas is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So to Paul's point is, I also think that there is a lot of drivers who try to be too smooth, and they're so smooth that they're slow. And again, I think that's one of the great fun challenges of what we do. It's finding that balance between smooth and fast.
Right.
And, if we're, and actually the other thing that I think is related to this is all that matters is that the car is balanced, and we can do things in the car that don't appear to be smooth, but the reaction the car has is smooth and balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, we know Ben's never going to be accused of being smooth, but Ben, do you have any questions you wanted to get into?
Yeah, I saw a good one on here. It's one we've probably touched on, but it's for what we hope is right up there with our target audience. This is a question about first timers, for how if you're a first timer at the track or the race, how to handle being overwhelmed with your inputs on the track. Like that's a lot to take in your first session out, I guess.
So the question again is how to not get overwhelmed with the inputs.
Right. There's so many inputs that you're not used to making. Things seem so different when you're on a track. Like what does the car feel, and what are we looking for once things slow down after you had to kind of take all of it in?
Well, and I hate to kind of go to what seems like the obvious response there, but certainly the further ahead you look, the more everything slows down. And I think most drivers who are overwhelmed, they're not looking far enough ahead, and things are just coming to them at the last second. They're having to deal with things really quickly. So I think that's the first part. And I guess maybe the other part of this is I'm not sure I'm fully understanding the question, like just where this person's at or how they're asking or what they're really looking for. But
first couple times at the track, it's really overwhelming.
So I think the biggest thing there is pick one or two things to really focus on and don't worry about everything else. And I know that's hard to say, well, don't worry about it when there's other cars on track and all other stuff. But if all you do is you focus on looking farther ahead and using the brake and gas pedal smoothly, and that just means, don't like snap them on, snap them off kind of thing. If you just think about that, or you just think about all I'm going to do is think about getting what the right feel of the line is. So pick one or two things. I usually say no more than three, but in this case, if it's that early in a person's experience level, it might be like, just pick one thing. Just that.
Yeah, maybe pick one thing and also remember to enjoy it, right?
Well, maybe if you pick one technique thing, number two is enjoy doing that. And
yeah, exactly.
The one thing actually, to your point is the one thing might be, I'm just gonna enjoy the feeling of moving around a track quickly. Because I think sometimes we're definitely in the beginning, we're so overwhelmed by the sensory overload and all the things that we've got to think about all at one time. We forget about how cool does this feel?
Right, exactly. Like it's a big wish fulfillment or a dream fulfillment to get to go fling your car as fast around somewhere as you can. It's easy to lose sight of that.
Yeah. And the flip side of that is some people, that is huge fun to do. For some people, that's terrifying. And they are on the track. And you have to admit that. I mean, there are people like, if you're on the track and you're feeling like, everybody tells me this is fun, but right now I'm not having fun because I'm terrified. If that's what's going on deep down inside you, that's okay. I don't think there's a driver ever that's ever been on a track that hasn't been terrified at some point in their life, their experience on the track. It's okay to be terrified, or maybe terrified isn't necessarily the right word, but in that direction. And at that point, just look further ahead and breathe.
There we go. Very essential.
Yeah, I tried. I went out with a first time ever driver, and two things I tried was, one, I took them out with my warm up lap so they didn't have to learn the track while driving. They could learn it from the passenger seat. And then when we switched for their first session, I said, listen, I will keep track of all the traffic behind us. You don't have to worry about it. I'll make sure we're good. You just focus on what you're doing, and I'll tell you when we need to let somebody by. And I think it just reduced the number of variables they were worried about. And they were still terrified, but they got into it a little bit quicker, I think.
And that is huge. And that's, I'd say that's like, in one way that should be in-car instruction 101, but it's not, because a lot of instructors don't do that. And as an instructor, a big part of our job is to actually do exactly what you did, which was take away some of the brain overload. Just say, look, I'm going to keep track of traffic all around us. I will tell you whether you're going too fast here or whether you need to brake more or whatever. Trust me, I'm going to look after all that stuff. All you have to do is this one thing. Just drive around the track, connect the dots with the line, and look far ahead. That's all you need to do. I'll look after everything else. And at that point, usually the driver goes, there's like this big kind of relax exhale. And they're like, okay, now I can deal with this.
Yep. They definitely had more time and energy and more air to be able to curse as they were going around a turn. It was Jennifer and Vicky's sister. So she's quite a sailor when she was going around the track. So
there's another one. There's another one.
Yeah, they just keep coming. They
Wow.
just keep coming.
Wow.
Yep. Miss Jen, you have one?
I do. Let me get there. I was a little lost.
Anyone you
I'm
want.
sorry.
It's
At where
okay.
we are.
Everything else is blank. So you go to one of the ones that's still written
That's
off.
red.
Red or black, doesn't matter. They're all good.
Okay. All right. How can I drive fast corners better?
How can I drive fast corners better? We sort of touched on this earlier. The classic thing for fast corners is to keep moving the brake zone in and in and in. And in fact, the best way to deal with fast corners is to make that speed adjustment earlier and then be squeezing on the power all the way through the corner, because again, it goes back to keeping the car better balanced. And then the other thing is being lighter on the brakes. And then, as I talked about earlier on as well, is looking further ahead and breathing. So, what stops us in fast corners typically is, again, that little bit of, call it whatever you want, self-preservation, risk aversion, fear, whatever you want to call it. There's some of that. And the further ahead we're looking and the more we're breathing, the more relaxed we're going to be. But if we just brake lighter and earlier, and then just keep on gradually picking up that speed a little bit more and more, we start to build confidence. And ultimately, that's what's going to make the difference, is when you get to the point where it's like, I love these fast corners. That's the biggest difference.
Ross, what about everybody who claims the title of the latest breaker on turn 7? I mean, in the paddock, what if I'm not the guy who breaks at the 2.5, and I'm the guy who breaks at the 3? I'm going to lose.
Well, what happens in the paddock, or what gets talked about in the paddock, doesn't necessarily happen on the track, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, and exactly. I know some drivers. I've raced against drivers who are, the king or queen of the late breakers, and they're often not the best drivers on the fast corners. And The best drivers know that, there are corners, specifically tighter, slower corners, where late braking helps you. But they also know that in fast corners, a little earlier on the brakes is a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Get the braking done a little earlier, get off the brakes earlier, your end of braking is a little bit earlier, and then you're squeezing the power as you're going through the corner, or getting back to power strongly, firmly. But therefore, the car is better balanced. And again, the better balanced car, the more grip you've got.
Don't believe the paddock 100%.
No.
I'm never telling the truth in the paddock. Never, ever, ever. Even if I'm lying about where I'm doing something on the track, I'm not going to tell somebody exactly what I'm doing, but I'm also going to tell even more outrageous lies than that.
We know that.
And to be fair, some of the lies are unintentional, right?
Right. Yes, totally.
Like the classic is, you have 3 drivers, and one of them says, I brake at the 200 marker. The other one says, I brake at the 250. And the other one says they brake at the 300 marker. And you look at the data, or you stand there in the corner and see when their brake lights come on, and you go, they're all braking at the exact same place. It's just their perception of what they're doing.
Or I'm flat through Eau Rouge, I promise.
Yeah.
Depends on the car.
Yeah. I'm in first gear, but I'm flat to the floor.
That's right.
All right. So I have a pet peeve that's at the track.
I'm right here. I'm right here.
You're the cute pet peeve.
All right.
How do you guys keep your hands warm?
How do you
Like,
keep them
What?
Especially in the rain.
when I'm racing and in the rain, I literally have my hands curled
She looks like a
over-
lobster.
over the steering wheel sometimes when it's raining and cold. What do you guys do? I mean, do you guys just ignore it? I mean, Ben, what about you? I need a solution.
Never thought about it one time.
No?
Never ever thought about it one time.
I've literally
Sorry.
come out of Road Atlanta with my hands like
She
in
looked
the
like a
shape of the
lobster.
steering wheel.
That's
In the
wild.
shape of the steering wheel, and I couldn't straighten them out.
As your attorney, I'm gonna have to recommend that you seek the attention of a physician to see what a physician says potentially about your circulation. I don't know. It's not a problem for me.
So here's something that I learned actually just, I'm going to say 3 years ago. We were at VIR. I was coaching a driver in a Radical, so an open cockpit car. It was 29 degrees.
Thank you.
Threatening to snow any moment. It was freezing cold, and the driver was out there, and he'd come in after a few laps and going, I can't feel anything in my feet or my hands. And one of the guys says, here, put these rubber gloves on, put surgical rubber gloves on, and then put your gloves on over top of that. And he went out and
That's a
drove,
great
and he was
idea.
perfectly fine.
It's a
And-
horrible
But you're
idea.
not allowed to do that.
And I'm going, I don't think that's a good thing from a fire perspective.
No.
Yeah.
But
Good.
I will say it kept his hands warm.
It's a good way to have blue hands.
Trash bags.
Maybe for
Yeah,
training. Yeah.
I've done that when you're working in the garage and it's hot and you're wearing the gloves. You put your gloves off, they're all sweaty, or the wrestler would put the trash bags on. That's kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah. So I don't. I mean, I think. Sorry, I'm going to say it, but
There is
live
no
with it.
solution. I'm telling you, if anybody else invented something like that, they probably make a ton of money. Hint,
Pair of your
hint.
normal size Nomex gloves, pair of the next size Nomex gloves.
See, I
Yeah.
think there's got to be a motorcycle guy who solved this problem before because they have no choice.
oh, and you can get heated gloves for motorcycles, but
Yeah, they don't have to worry about being on fire.
yeah.
Really?
They leave the fire scene pretty quickly usually.
Yeah, I guess they get out
Exactly.
pretty easy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, all right. So,
Interesting question though. So
Yeah.
all right. So let's skip these and let's go right to the things that aren't going to cause an uproar on the internet. So we mentioned Lewis and Max earlier. So I think the last few races, it all depends on if you take an unbiased, I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan or I'm a Max Verstappen fan. I think it depends on the rules of the organization. So it'll vary from different systems that you're racing in. Like SCCA may have different rules than Grid Life, which may have different rules than NASA. But if you were to look at, and I'm not fully fluent in the Formula One rules, but if you were to look at the last few races, do you think it was an issue with the way the rules were being interpreted or the way the rules were not consistent? And what do you think would be the best way to improve that going forward? Because it was almost like soured me on the racing itself. And why am I watching?
oh boy.
I waited till
Here
the
we
end, Ross.
Okay. So first of all, I thought it was a fantastic season of Formula One because you had the two best drivers pushing each other to the limits and sometimes a little beyond. That's what Formula One should be about. I thought that was fantastic. I was extremely disappointed and frustrated by the way the rules were interpreted throughout the season. And to me, the biggest problem that Formula One has is they have 3 stewards at every race, and they're not the same ones. They're different they mix them up and they have different. As an example, at the Red Bull Ring race, Lando Norris, Sergio Perez tried to pass Norris on the outside of turn, what is that, as 5, I think it is, around the outside, came around the outside of the exit. Norris is on the track. His tires are on the edge of the curbing, and Perez is having to go off the track, right?
Right.
The officials penalized Norris for that, for not giving him room, like he was supposed to pull in,
Give up the track.
and give up the track to allow Perez to stay on the track. I don't agree with that, but that's the call they made. And in fact, they made the same call on Perez later in the race.
I remember.
Then other races, for example, Brazil, you have Hamilton on the outside of a corner, Verstappen on the inside of the corner, go into that corner, and they both go off the track, and there's no call on either one of them.
Right.
And that's the problem, is at one race, you've got the stewards that say, that's not right. And at another race, you have a different set of stewards saying essentially the same scenario, that's okay. And that's the thing that all the drivers complained about all season long. And I complain about as a motorsport fan, enthusiast, participant, whatever, is all we ever want from rule makers is consistency. You can make all the rules in the world or have no rules, but just enforce them consistently. And what Formula One did this past year, is they enforced the rules inconsistently. And that is what resulted with more incidents than should have happened, I believe. And yeah, I mean, even the last race, that first lap of the race, Verstappen outbrakes Hamilton, stays on the track. Hamilton goes off, gains an advantage. At the previous race, I think it was, or in many other races, he would have been penalized for that. But in that time, he wasn't. So it's like, you just need to be consistent. And so if you look at IndyCar, you look at IMSA, they have stewards as well doing the same thing that the stewards in F1 are doing. An incident happens, and while in the case of Formula One, Michael Massey is still watching the race, he has 3 people reviewing the video from many different angles, watching that, and they come to him and say, we believe that they should be penalized or not penalized. And in IndyCar or IMSA, I believe the race director has the ability to overrule that, but 99.99% of the time doesn't, just takes the steward's decision and say, there we go. The difference is IndyCar and IMSA use basically the same stewards at every single race. So they see things the same way. And that way, the rules are enforced the same way. And then the drivers know, I can get away with this, I can't get away with that. And that's the way it should be. I think until Formula One changes that, we're going to continue to see this, especially if Lewis and Max keep going at it the way they're going at it.
Right. Do you think it's a track limits issue or the sausage curbs, or is it just variability?
That contributes to it a huge amount. And that's a whole other thing. I mean, if it was up to me, all these tracks would have the track, the curbing, and then there'd be maybe a yard or two or a meter or two of gravel. And then there would be the large paved parking lots on the outside of them, all the runoff room. And that way, if somebody dropped wheels off the edge of the curbing, they would be penalized by dropping wheels into the gravel. Still, if they went across the gravel and spun, they'd have all that runoff room on the outside. So you'd have that safety. So all they would really need to do with a lot of these tracks, Coda being one of them, is just go in there and just on the back side of the curbs, cut that 1 to 2 yards or meters
trench of gravel
and put gravel in there. And yes, there's a downside of drivers dropping wheels into gravel and throwing gravel all over the track. But guess what? Drivers have been dealing with gravel debris on tracks for many, many years and are okay. And I also know that one of the concerns is, well, if a car slides across sideways, hits gravel, there's a chance that when it hits the pavement again, that it could flip the car. And yeah, there is that danger. I think with the way they can groom tracks and everything these days, I think you can have just enough of a
Taper
bevel
to
on
it.
that
Yeah.
pavement and all that kind of stuff. I think they could make all that work. Yeah, I mean the track limits thing. You know, the other thing is that, and I know some tracks have tried this, and I think they've even tried it maybe in some series, is watch a tennis match and they have lights or electronic eyes watching whether the ball is in or out.
Yep.
You could have that on the edges of all the tracks, and as soon as a driver exceeds a track limit, bing,
yep.
And that could even trigger a light on the dash in the car that says you've exceeded that. You know, like all that's there, and so for sure the track limits thing is compounding the problem.
I'm gonna have to call you on this.
I was gonna say I was convinced that you were gonna put standing water where you're talking about the gravel. I was like, oh, he's gonna put a moat there.
Full of alligators.
See,
yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna have to call Ross on this one because he said all you need to do, because I know if Ross was in charge, there's one more thing. You would add sprinklers to all the tracks.
Well, there would be that too. Then we could go real racing in the
That's
rain.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Mr. Dawson.
Yeah, I got a technique question, and it's something we kind of touched on a little bit when we were trying to help Vicki out with her sequencing of getting into a corner. But I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about the specifics of downshifting and the timing and the approach. I myself am a fan of doing, almost all of my braking and then just grabbing the downshift at the last second before I'm going to need to engage whatever gear I'm shifting up into. I'm also, I confess to being somebody who skips gears, so I'll go fifth to third, but I tell myself it's okay because I'm waiting so late in the sequence that I'm not rushing to shift. I'm giving myself plenty of time to ease the gear lever in. So I was just curious to see what you think about the timing and where to do your downshift in the sequence of getting ready to turn in.
So first of all, I agree 100% with you that skip shifting on the way down from fifth to third, rather than going fifth to fourth to third, right. I think is a really smart thing to do and a good thing to do, as long as you have the right rhythm and timing. Like I almost think that you have to go through a period of time of going through all the gears, and then you get the right timing, and then you can start to skip on the downshift. Gotcha. So I agree with that 100%. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but I'm a big fan of the less you do, the less chance of an error.
Right.
So I like that approach. The second thing that I like about what you said was you leave your downshift to as late as possible in the brake zone. Right. And I'm a big believer, like the worst thing you can do is brake downshift because you're just going to over rev the engine and probably lock up wheels and whatever, right? So it's, brake, wait as long as you can to get the downshift done in the brake zone. My only other sort of guideline is, but finish your downshift before you turn into the corner. And I think it's to the point that Vicki, you made a little bit of, if you enter the corner, you turn into the corner and then you let the clutch out while you've got wheel in, there is a chance that the rear wheels in a rear wheel drive car are going to kind of lock up and you're going to find yourself spinning. So if at all possible, and it is possible in 99.99% of corners, to get get that downshifting done. And my own personal approach and rule or guideline for myself is I want to have the last downshift complete and my foot completely off the clutch before I ever turn into the corner. And it's almost like I'm not allowed to turn the steering wheel until my foot is off the clutch. So gotcha. Then you kind of look at, and one of the things I'm really big on is thinking about braking as a brake zone, as opposed to that's where I start braking. I brake, braking begins at the 300.
Right.
That's a point. But really, you have a brake zone. And then you just, as you come to that, you go, okay, I've got one downshift to make. Okay, I'm just going to do that in the last third or quarter of the brake zone before the turn-in point. If I've got three, I got to go down 3 gears, then I'm going to space them out and just kind of, brake, boom, down a gear, boom, down a gear, boom, down a gear, turn in.
Right, I got you. So you're thinking more like a brake capsule rather than this point. You're sort of thinking like, where am I going to sort of move this capsule of braking around?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And I'm I'm an old guy, and so I still believe that if you're driving a manual transmission vehicle, you should heel and toe downshift.
Yeah.
And
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean it's part of what it takes to drive a manual transmission car well. There's no excuse not to heel and toe other than lack of practice. And yes, if somebody's coming to the track for their first few times and they don't know how to heel and toe, I've been known many times to say, let's not worry about it right now. We'll get to that later. But it is something, and it's something that you can practice on the street, and then it gets easier on the track.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, to your point that we talked about earlier, Vicki, is just, that's part of the whole routine. It's just, brake, bound, downshift, boom, boom, boom. And you don't think about it anymore. Like, I'm trying to think of the last time I actually thought about downshifting. Like it just happens. It's like, well, I was going to say, it's like putting your left turn signal on to go around a corner. I'm going to say for some drivers, they don't think about that. It just happens.
Yeah,
For a lot of drivers, for a lot of drivers, they're going, there's a left turn signal?
Yeah, Bill had asked me one day, he says, are you a left foot braker? And I'm just like, I don't know. But I think I am, like in my SUV, because occasionally, I have a left foot that's itchy, and it's a stand. It's
an automatic.
It's an automatic. He goes, are you a left foot braker? And I'm like, I never really thought about it before. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I am, but maybe. Because I haven't caught myself doing it. It's weird.
That's a whole other Pandora's box.
I know, but it's weird that you're not really sure exactly what you're doing, because you work so hard to have that stuff become second nature, so you don't have to think about it. And then when you have to think about it, you're like, well, wait a minute, what am I doing down there?
Well, what's funny, you reminded me, Vicki, of I used to play a lot of tennis. And one of the little tricks, you're playing somebody, and as you're changing courts, changing sides, you might just go by the other player and you say, by the way, do you inhale or exhale as you're hitting the ball on a serve?
Never really thought about it.
And guess what? Their serve just goes totally to crap, because they're thinking about, my breathing. Oh, yeah. So
that's evil.
It works in golf exquisitely.
Yeah.
Like, before you take the club back, do you inhale or exhale?
Do you inhale or exhale on a turn?
Exactly.
I'm immune to that because I just drive the cart and drink the beer and never touch the clubs.
True.
I thought you were going to talk about driving on the track. You're drinking beer on the track? That's not a good thing.
I was going to say drinking with Dawson, not dominating with Dawson.
I raced carts on dirt out in Johnston County, North Carolina, and a couple of times in my 2 seasons doing that before I got to road course stuff, they'd have to have a driver's meeting and go, all right, guys, listen, I know we all like to have a beer, but you got to not do it before and I didn't really realize, I guess there were people who were catching enough of a buzz that it was an issue, but I mean, they had to have a driver's meeting and tell all these drivers who were wearing, helmets, a lot of gear, a lot of safety stuff, racing a methanol fueled vehicle, like, hey, don't hit the suds until after the race. I was so shocked to hear it, because all I could do at the track was get my stuff ready. I was never even thinking about hitting a beer at the track.
I have never seen that. Never, ever.
It definitely happened in real world in like 2004. It was crazy.
No, I've seen them, tag one on at, pretty heavy Saturday night, and I still have no idea how they manage them on Sunday.
Yeah. We've seen their Sundays though.
Not me.
Don't show up Sunday,
I can't.
You're talking about Bill?
No.
Oh.
Never Bill.
No. If you're talking about Slurpees, yeah, man, I will pound Slurpees all day long. But no.
Well, Bill has never acquired the desire to actually even drink.
Nope. That tastes good.
Well, I'm happy to find out. I'm happy to find out my approach to downshifting is in the right zone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, we got one left for everybody. We got to let Ross have some fun tonight and then get off this podcast. So, Vicki, pick your favorite.
My favorite
Question.
My favorite?
Pick a question, Beck.
Oh yeah. All right. How can one improve your sense of feel in the car? Because you want to feel the car. Now
And speed.
And speed.
Speed
But
sense.
do you want to do the question? Serious?
Sure.
All right. Go ahead.
It was a joke.
So
All right.
how do
I had an awakening at some point where I actually felt the car. Now, are there certain ways that you could drills or a way of learning it or sensing that you know of?
So yes, and let me talk about that, but just I got to go back and ask you, what was your awakening? Like, what was that? What caused that?
I think it was after the skid pad.
Okay.
Or maybe it was just before the skid pad. It was right around that area where there was just a certain point in time when I felt the back end of the car move. But I was comfortable, like I was strapped in and I felt like it was part of me.
Uh-huh.
If that makes any sense at all. Like
Absolutely.
I was when they were always saying you steer the front of the car or you direct the front of the car with the steering wheel, but you direct the back of the car with the brakes and the gas. And at some point that all made sense because I felt it. It could have been after the skid pad. But it just made sense. I'm like, oh, that's what they mean. So, and that's when that whole steering wheel and gas pedal direction kind of started making sense. And that's when I started actually learning how to really rotate and maneuver the car.
So I
don't know how I got there though.
Okay. Yeah. So to me, there's kind of two ways. One is you just kind of keep practicing and eventually someday, aha, you have an awakening. You felt it. And
right.
And then you can kind of, you've experienced it once. So you want to go back and try to experience it again. That may happen immediately, or it may be another year before you experience it again. Who knows? But the other one is then to do it in a more deliberate way where you practice things that will help you sense that earlier. And the technique that I use as a coach a lot is doing what I call sensory input sessions. And if you think about how you sense that rotation of the car, like the back of the car I had more slip, essentially it started to oversteer. You had more slip angle in the rear tires. The car started to change direction. It rotated, all those different things that you sensed. And you think about how did you sense that? Well, internally in your body, there is in simple ways to think about it, you have a gyro in your body. And if you standing right where you are right now, if you just stand there, close your eyes, but you twist your body, you can tell which direction your head is pointing in. So you have that built into your body. You have, when you turn into the corner, you feel the steering wheel, kind of the feedback through the wheel. Typically in most cars, it tends to get heavier and heavier and heavier, and then it starts to get lighter as the tires start to go beyond the peak of grip. We look off in the distance and we see the car start to change direction. And then if the car oversteers, the direction on the horizon has changed more than we expected it to. Or if it understeers, that position on the horizon has changed less than we expected it to. We go through the corner and we hear the tires going, making different sounds. And we go, when they're making that sound, I feel like I've got good grip in the front end. I can feel that in the steering wheel, and I don't feel a back end oversteering too much. I might feel just a little bit of it, and I like that feeling. And the tires are making that sound. And we start to file that away through seat time, right? But if we went on the track and did what I call sensory input sessions, where you go on the track and you do a session where all you do is you listen, and you take a session and all you do is you focus on the sound of the tires, the sound of the engine, the sound of the brakes, the sound of the air rushing past the car, the sound, like sometimes you're going down a straightaway, you can hear the different sound of the engine and the car as it goes through a little dip. It goes, like you hear that little dip in the track. And it may be that you hear, and then you turn in and you sense where you are on the track by the sound. And then you do a session where all you do is you focus on everything you can feel, vibrations and feedback back to the steering wheel. What do you feel through the pedals? What do you feel through the seat? Do you feel the G loads building up, building, and then starting to relax? Or are they still building as you're going through the corner? And can you feel that rotation in the car? And then you do a session that's all visual, and all you do is you focus on, what do you see? Do you see little cracks and seams in the pavement? Can you see the front of the car dive down or dip down when you brake? Can you see the car, the hood of the car or the front of the car kind of leaning as you go around a corner? What do you see? And if you do those things on a regular basis, you're learning how to sense that stuff in a shorter period of time. So when I'm coaching a driver and what they need is to get better at sensing the limits of the car, the very first thing we do is we do these sensory input sessions. And it is something that with a lot of drivers, we'll go back and do over and over and over again. And by the way, I coach some drivers on simulators, and even though most simulators don't have motion or very, very little motion, even the best simulators don't have all the motion. But even if it's a static simulator, you sense the visual picture and you sense the sound. And sometimes there is feedback through the steering wheel, there's vibrations. So you can actually practice this on a simulator even. So we could spend another 2 hours just on this topic. But if you practice that and start to become more aware of it, and to the point that you brought up earlier on, is we also don't want to think about it too consciously either, right? But we do for a period of time. We want to consciously think about taking in that sensory input, and then the next time you go on the track, you just focus on your line and everything else that you're working on. Guess what? Your brain is still taking in that information, but at a higher level, at a better level than it ever did before. So that's why that sensory input session is, it's my number one coaching tool. It's kind of my go-to when I've got a driver that just needs to sense the limit a little bit more. And I've had drivers doing an auditory session where they got out of the car afterwards and they got this big smile on their face and going, I get it now. Like, I got it. Mm-hmm. I had a driver last year after driving at, I think he raced the WRL race at Barber, I think. And he called me after the weekend and he said, I just realized something. If all I do is I listen to the car, the tires, the sound of the air rushing past, if I just listen to that, I really focus on that, I drive faster and I'm more sensitive to what the car is telling me. Now, I've had some other drivers say, listening to it doesn't really do me any good. But if I just focus on what I feel, that helps me. Other drivers, it's more of a visual thing. So do those sensory input sessions on a regular basis and use them as tune-ups. Mm-hmm. Why are Lewis and Mack so good? Because they've spent so many years feeling the cart in the car and hearing the cart in the car and seeing it. They've just fine-tuned those senses. Were they born with something special? I don't know. None of us know. What we do know is that they've spent a lot of time practicing those things. So sensory input sessions, simple. There you go.
Thank you.
Very cool. Miss Jen, you have a favorite?
Yeah, I was looking at why double apex turns?
Why double apex turns
versus a diamond approach?
Versus a diamond approach? Well, first of all, I tend to think of, well, that's a lot of double apex corners. I think of, they are a diamond line. So I'm trying to think of some examples. And I last
Gingerman?
year, Gingerman. Well, there's that. What's that one?
6, 7, I think, or 5, 6.
5, 6. That kind of a corner, and that's an example of just the way the track lines up. You come through and you clip one, and you kind of let it drift out, and then you come back again. That's an example of that. Yeah, I mean, that's more of a sort of a, it's two corners that you drive as one, but as a double apex corner. The first corner that comes to mind that is real classic, you can drive it two ways, is actually turn 2 at Thunder Hill East.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a big 180-degree sweeping corner, and a lot of drivers will come in and kind of try to drive it as the classic line, where they come down, break in a straight line, turn in late, and come back to a single apex. And in doing so, they travel a lot more distance at a slower speed. They spend more time at their min speed than if you drive a double apex or diamond line, where you come in, you kind of angle the car on an angle, brake on an angle, clipping an early apex, even if you don't get all the way right to the inside edge. You let the car kind of drift out a little bit in the middle of the corner, and then you come back. That's the point of the diamond. And you come back and clip a second apex. You spend more time at higher speed and less time at the min speed doing that.
Keyhole,
actually,
maybe?
What's that?
Keyhole, maybe? At
I was just going to
Mid-Ohio?
say, Keyhole at Mid-Ohio is the same kind of way. You can drive it sort of a classic line, keep it out wide, and then come back to a single apex. Most drivers that are really quick, and if you watch Indy cars, most of them are doing more of a diamond or double apex, where they come in, kind of clip early, let the car come out, and it's not way out in the middle, but it's just, it might come out maybe even half a car width or so, or a car width away from the inside, and then they turn it and come back again, and it just allows you to spend less time at min speed. That's the reason for using that line. Trying to think of some other places. In some ways, you can think of turn 17 at Sebring like that. Although turn 17 at Sebring is a corner unlike every other corner in the world. But it's the same kind of thing. Even the carousel at Road America can be driven a little bit like that, where you drive it in, you kind of apex early on in the carousel, and then the car kind of just naturally drifts out a little bit to not quite mid track, and then you bring it back down to a late apex again to get out of the corner. And again, the idea is you rather than slow in, fast out, it's fast in, collected in the middle, turn it, and then fast out. So fast in, fast out. And that's why that line tends to work. And this is one of those definitely ones that needs the clarification around it. This is not for all corners, and it's not for all cars, and not even for all drivers. But if you're really comfortable with that really driving it in deep into the corner and kind of braking well into the corner, getting the car to turn and rotate and then get back out of it, you're going to be faster that way.
I think I understand it finally. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Dawson, you're last of the night.
I'm going off the reservation. I'm going to hit you with a question from one of my teammates. It's kind of a racing industry question, just for like to hear what your opinion is. Not necessarily assuming there's going to be. I'm not assuming expertise here, but I just we kind of wanted to hear. What do you think your kind of prediction is on the future of motorsport, given EVs coming in so much? My teammate is specifically worried since those kind of vehicles are so much more expensive, and racing's about to get a whole lot more expensive.
I guess I'm very hopeful that, first of all, with electric vehicles, I think it's going to be long enough. Like, I think we're going to be driving gas-powered cars at the amateur level for a long time still, because I think
so
for that reason, I think the electric car thing, I mean, there's still a lot of the technology that's needed still needs to trickle down to cost effective and if you showed up and there's 120 cars at Summit Point tomorrow and they're all electric and there's 4 charging stations, what are we going to do?
Right.
A little Honda generator is not going to do the job. So I think
No.
just from that perspective, I think it's actually going to be quite a while, I believe, before gas-powered cars are going to be gone from racetracks. From that perspective, do I think that at the upper levels of pro racing, from electric racing to hybrid, more and more hybrid? Yeah, I mean, that's just naturally going to happen, I think. And
Right.
I think there's enough purists still running the sport that I think we still have another decade or more that we're going to still see a lot of gas powered cars in motorsport that way. I think the other, kind of the other part of this is a question that I hear, and maybe it's related to this or not, but it's we're all going to be driving autonomous cars, or we're going to be riding around in autonomous cars. And I think that's actually going to be a boon to motorsport. I think that, yeah, for sure, there's going to be some point in the future where you're going to hit a button on your app on your phone, or actually you'll blink at your phone, and it will trigger something in an app, and a Uber-like tow vehicle is going to show up with your car that's already loaded in it, your gas-powered car, and you're going to hop in the back, and you're going to sit in the back looking at your iPad's type screen that's there and watching track videos on the way to the track. And you're going to get there, you're going to unload your gas powered car, you're going to go out and drive it all day long, and you're going to put it back in the trailer and hit home, and it's going to take you. So I actually think that, and maybe that's a bit wild, but I think that kind of idea that I think we're going to rely more and more on autonomous vehicles and all that, ride share and all that kind of stuff. But I think the sport of driving is only going to grow because of that. It's
Gotcha.
the classic, when the car came along, everyone went, well, horses won't be needed anymore. Well, the sport of horse riding only got bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
So I think the sport of driving is going to grow.
Hope so.
As long as I'm alive anyways. And after I'm dead, who cares?
You're not allowed to, because we wouldn't have anybody on our 50th anniversary episodes, Ross.
Yeah. Okay. I got to survive for how many more weeks?
Long time.
Hang in there.
50 more weeks. Yeah.
We've got 4 digits on our episode numbers on purpose, so we got a lot more episodes to do, Ross.
Wow. Okay.
You don't get off that easy, but
Yeah.
you do tonight. Thank you again for coming on and celebrating episode 300.
Thank you.
And once again, congrats on that. That's pretty darn cool. That's
We're getting there.
Yeah.
We're going to do something special for the Indy 500 episode. We got a couple days before we have to plan it, though. We don't know what it'll be. We'll figure something out.
I got an idea. Watch the race.
Well,
Ah.
There we go.
depends how the timing works out. You never know.
Yeah.
We'll see how we do. Thank you, Ross. It's always great having you on.
Thank you. And always fun. Thanks.
Thank you, Ross.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Been fun.
Thank you.
If people want to find you, they go to
Speedsecrets.com.
you make
And
it
if
easy.
you're into sim racing, simraceracademy.com.
Ooh.
Oh, I forgot to tell you, Vicki, we're members of simraceracademy.com.
Oh, that's great.
I'm just marking that down.
Well, there goes my membership. It's being taken care of. Woohoo! Thank you, Ross. It's always great. Pleasure.
Thanks.
We'll bother you again. If you'll answer
Have-
the emails, we'll send you another one. That's not a problem.
All right.
Have fun.
All right.
Thank you, Ross.